The relentless Montana sun beat down on Eliza Blackett's weary shoulders as she guided the weathered wagon across the dusty plains, her 5-year-old daughter Lily sleeping beside her. 3 years of solitary struggle had carved lines into her once youthful face, but they hadn't broken her spirit, the same spirit that now carried her back to the only place she'd ever truly called home. Eliza's eyes stung, not just from the dust and glare, but from the memories flooding back as the familiar landscape of Riversbend came into view. The modest settlement looked much the same as when she'd fled in the dead of night, her newborn clutched to her chest and fear dogging her every step. Now she returned a different woman, harder, wiser, and absolutely terrified of what awaited her. "Mama, are we there?" Lily stirred beside her, rubbing sleep from eyes that mirrored her father's, a startling blue against her sun-kissed skin. "Almost, sweetheart." Eliza smoothed her daughter's wild blonde curls. "Remember what I told you about where we're going?" Lily nodded solemnly. "It's where you lived before, where there are horses and nice people." She hesitated. "And maybe my papa." Eliza's heart clenched. What could she possibly tell this child about Xavier Ingram, the man whose very existence she'd kept secret for years? The cowboy who'd stolen her heart, given her a child, and who believed, thanks to Eliza's own desperate lie, that his daughter had died shortly after birth. The wagon rattled down the main street, drawing curious stares from townsfolk who paused mid-stride. Eliza recognized many faces, now older, some hardened by the passing years. Riversbend had grown some. A new general store stood where once was just a trading post, and the saloon had expanded, sporting fresh paint and a proper sign. But the essence remained unchanged, a frontier town clinging to existence in the harsh beauty of the Montana Territory, circa 1878. Outside the livery stable, Eliza pulled the wagon to a stop, her hands trembling on the reins. "Stay here just a moment, Lily," she instructed, helping her daughter settle on the seat. "I need to speak with someone." The stable doors stood open, the familiar scents of hay, leather, and horses washing over her. Eliza stepped inside, allowing her eyes to adjust to the dimness. A tall figure stood at the far end, his back to her as he brushed down a chestnut mare. She'd know that silhouette anywhere. "Xavier." Her voice emerged barely above a whisper. The brush stilled. His shoulders tensed, then slowly, as if afraid of what he might see, Xavier Ingram turned. The years had weathered him like they had the surrounding mountains, making him somehow more substantial, more present. The boyish cowhand she'd loved was now undeniably a man. His dark hair was still unruly beneath his worn hat, but threads of silver now appeared at his temples. His face was leaner, the stubble on his jaw darker. But those eyes, those piercing blue eyes, remained unchanged, widening now in disbelief. "Eliza," he breathed her name like a prayer, like a curse, like something sacred and forbidden all at once. "My God, Eliza," she managed a tremulous smile. "Hello, Xav." The brush clattered to the ground. He took one halting step forward, then stopped, uncertainty written across his features. "They said you were dead," after a while when no word came. His voice broke. 3 years, Eliza, 3 years of nothing, I know." Shame and regret formed a bitter mixture in her throat. "I'm sorry, I couldn't." A small voice called from outside. "Mama, can I come in now?" Xavier's gaze snapped to the stable entrance, confusion evident in his furrowed brow. Eliza's heart pounded so hard she feared it might burst from her chest. "Please," she whispered, "there's someone you need to meet." Before she could move, Lily appeared in the doorway, impatience having gotten the better of her. The child stood silhouetted against the bright day, a tiny figure in a dusty dress. Xavier's eyes darted between them, confusion giving way to something else, something raw and vulnerable that made Eliza's chest ache. "Who's that, Mama?" Lily asked, stepping further into the stable, her curious gaze fixed on Xavier. Time seemed to suspend itself as Xavier stared at the child. Eliza watched as understanding dawned in his eyes, recognition of his own features reflected in Lily's face, the unmistakable shade of blue that had skipped generations in his family until him. "Lily," Eliza said gently, "this is Mr. Ingram." Xavier sank slowly to one knee, bringing himself to the child's height. His voice, when he found it, was rough with emotion. "Hello, Lily." The little girl regarded him curiously, head tilted. Then, with the simple clarity of childhood, she asked, "Are you my papa?" Xavier's breath caught audibly. He looked up at Eliza, questions and accusations warring in his gaze. "You told me our baby died," he said, the words barely audible. Eliza's eyes filled with tears. "I know, I had to, but Lily was already moving, drawn by some invisible thread of recognition that Eliza couldn't fathom. Perhaps it was in the blood, this knowing. Perhaps children carried memories their minds couldn't name. Whatever it was, Lily crossed the space between them and, without hesitation, threw her small arms around Xavier's neck. "Mama said my papa was brave and kind. Are you brave and kind?" Xavier's composure shattered. He gathered the child to him, tears streaming unchecked down his weathered face. His shoulders shook with silent sobs as he held his daughter for the first time, his large hand cradling the back of her head with infinite tenderness. "I try to be," he managed, his voice thick with emotion. "I try real hard to be both those things." Eliza stood frozen, witnessing the reunion she'd both longed for and dreaded. The sight of Xavier, strong, steadfast Xavier, weeping as he held their child, broke something loose inside her. The carefully constructed walls she'd built around her heart began to crumble. Lily pulled back, patting Xavier's tear-streaked face with small hands. "Don't cry, Papa. Mama says brave people can cry, but you don't have to be sad now. We came home." Xavier looked up at Eliza over their daughter's head, his expression a complex mixture of joy, grief, and something that looked dangerously like the love she'd run from years ago. "Why?" he asked simply. The question contained multitudes. "Why did you leave? Why did you lie? Why have you returned?" Eliza drew a shaky breath. "It's a long story," she said, "and I owe you every word of it." Xavier nodded slowly, rising to his feet with Lily still in his arms. The child settled against him as if she'd always belonged there, her small hand patting his shoulder in unconscious comfort. "I've got time," he said, and despite everything, the hurt, the years of separation, the lies between them, Eliza saw in his eyes the same steadfast devotion that had both saved and terrified her all those years ago. She'd come back to Riversbend with little hope and fewer options. What she hadn't dared to anticipate was forgiveness, or the possibility that some loves were strong enough to weather even the harshest of storms. As Xavier stepped toward her, their daughter balanced on his hip, Eliza felt something long dormant stir within her chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. The small cabin Xavier called home sat nestled against a backdrop of pines, a short ride from town. Eliza remembered it well, had helped him raise the roof beams, plant the garden that now flourished beside it, chosen the curtains that still hung in the windows. It had been meant to be their home before everything fell apart. Now she sat at the rough-hewn table, a steaming cup of coffee before her, watching as Xavier showed Lily around the small space. The child's delight at every discovery, a carved wooden horse on the mantel, the colorful quilt on the bed, the litter of kittens in a basket by the stove pierced Eliza's heart with bittersweet longing for what might have been. "She has your laugh," Xavier said quietly, returning to the table while Lily played with the kittens. "And your stubbornness." A ghost of a smile touched Eliza's lips. "But your eyes, your height, too, she's tall for her age." Xavier's gaze remained on their daughter. "You were going to tell me why," he reminded her gently. Eliza wrapped her hands around the warm mug, gathering courage. "I was afraid," she finally admitted. "When I found out I was expecting, I was so happy, Xav, we both were. But then—" "Jacob Mercer," Xavier supplied, his expression darkening. Eliza nodded. Jacob Mercer, the wealthy cattle baron who had terrorized Riversbend, who had taken a particular interest in Eliza since her arrival in town as a young widow. His obsession had turned dangerous when she'd chosen Xavier instead. "He came to me the night before our wedding," she continued, voice barely above a whisper. "Said he'd destroy you if I married you, that he'd make it look like an accident, a fall from a horse, a stampede." He described it all so calmly, Xav, like he was discussing the weather. She shuddered at the memory. I knew he meant it. He'd done it before to others who crossed him. Xavier's hand clenched on the table. You should have told me and risked you confronting him. He had hired guns, connections with the territorial governor. You would have died, Xavier. So you ran. His voice held no judgment, just a deep sadness. I fabricated the story about a sick aunt in Denver needing care. I planned to send word once I was settled somewhere safe, but then. Eliza glanced at Lily. The journey was hard. I nearly lost her during the birth. By the time I recovered enough to travel again, I heard rumors that Mercer was looking for me, that he suspected the child was yours. I couldn't risk him finding us. So you let me believe my child was dead. The pain in Xavier's voice cut deep. It was cruel, Eliza acknowledged, tears welling. The cruelest thing I've ever done. I thought it would be safer for you both if Mercer believed that too, that if there was no child connecting us, he might eventually leave you alone. Xavier was silent for a long moment, processing. Mercer died last winter, he finally said. Influenza took him and half his household. The news hit Eliza like a physical blow. Dead. All this time we've been hiding, moving from place to place, and he's been dead, Xavier confirmed. For 8 months now. A laugh that was half sob escaped Eliza. I didn't know. I was working as a schoolteacher in a small settlement near the Wyoming border. News travels slow. She shook her head in disbelief. When the school closed after a mining accident took most of the town's men, I had nowhere else to go. I thought maybe enough time had passed that it might be safe to return to at least let you know about Lily. Xavier reached across the table, his calloused fingers hesitating just short of touching hers. And if Mercer had still been alive, I don't know, she admitted honestly. I was desperate, Xav. We were down to our last few dollars. He nodded slowly, then surprised her by gently covering her hand with his. You did what you thought was right to protect our daughter, he said. I can't fault you for that, even if the way you went about it nearly destroyed me. The simple touch of his hand on hers sent warmth coursing through Eliza's veins. She'd forgotten this about Xavier, his capacity for understanding, for forgiveness. It had been one of the first things she'd loved about him. Papa. Lily approached, a ginger kitten cradled carefully in her small hands. Can we keep one? Mama never let me have a cat before because we moved too much. Xavier's face softened as he looked at his daughter. I reckon that's fine if your mother agrees to stay around long enough for you to raise it properly. The question in his statement hung in the air between them. Eliza met his gaze, seeing both caution and hope there. I think, she said carefully, that Lily and I would very much like to stop moving for a while. The smile that spread across Xavier's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. Then I suppose you'd better pick out the best kitten of the bunch, he told Lily, who beamed and hurried back to make her selection. When she was out of earshot, Xavier turned back to Eliza. This doesn't fix everything between us, he said quietly. There's trust to rebuild. I know. She hesitated, then asked the question that had haunted her for 3 years. During all this time, was there anyone else for you? Xavier's blue eyes held hers steadily. There couldn't be, he said simply. Not when every woman I met was just a shadow compared to you. Eliza's heart squeezed painfully in her chest. I never stopped loving you, she confessed. Even when I convinced myself I was doing the right thing by staying away, something in Xavier's expression eased. Then we have somewhere to start. As the afternoon waned into evening, Eliza helped Xavier prepare a simple dinner. The domesticity of it, chopping vegetables side by side, setting the table for 3, felt both strange and achingly familiar. Lily chattered happily, asking Xavier endless questions about his horses, the town, and the surrounding countryside. After dinner, exhaustion finally caught up with the child. She fell asleep on Xavier's lap as he sat in the rocking chair by the fire, telling her stories of his own childhood in these mountains. Eliza watched them, her heart so full it hurt, as Xavier carefully carried Lily to the small alcove bed where he'd quickly arranged fresh linens. She's out cold, he said softly, returning to the main room. Journey must have worn her out. She's never had a father before, Eliza replied. The excitement alone would be enough to exhaust her. Xavier poked at the fire, adding another log. What happens now, Eliza? She clasped her hands in her lap, suddenly uncertain. I thought perhaps I could find work in town. The wagon and team could be sold. We could rent rooms somewhere until I stay here, Xavier interrupted, turning to face her. Both of you, Eliza stared at him. Here. But I'm not suggesting we pick up exactly where we left off, he clarified. There's much to sort through between us. But this cabin has plenty of room, and it's rightfully half yours anyway. We built it together. I can take the lean-to out back. It's comfortable enough in this weather. I couldn't put you out of your home, Eliza protested. You wouldn't be. His eyes held hers. This place has never felt like a home without you in it, Eliza. It's just been somewhere I sleep. The rawness of his admission stole her breath. Xavier. He moved closer, kneeling before her chair. Let me get to know my daughter, he said quietly. Let me show you both that there can be stability here, safety. Whatever else happens between us, whatever you decide, you want, at least give us that chance. Eliza looked into his earnest face and knew she couldn't deny him this, nor did she want to. All right, she whispered. We'll stay. Relief washed over his features. He reached for her hand, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles that sent shivers racing up her arm. Thank you. That night, Eliza lay beside her sleeping daughter in Xavier's bed, surrounded by his scent and the memories it evoked. Outside, she could hear him moving about in the lean-to, preparing his own sleeping space. A wall and yards of complicated emotions separated them, but for the first time in 3 years, Eliza fell asleep feeling like she might finally be where she belonged. The following weeks unfolded in a tentative dance of rediscovery. Xavier rose before dawn each morning to tend to his duties as the town's head wrangler and farrier. But he always returned mid-morning with fresh provisions or small gifts, a ribbon for Lily's hair, wildflowers for the table, a book for Eliza that he'd ordered specially from Denver months ago and had been saving. Eliza busied herself making the cabin truly habitable for 3. She mended curtains, planted additional rows in the vegetable garden, and cleaned everything until it gleamed. When Xavier returned one afternoon with lumber and supplies to expand the cabin, she worked alongside him, their bodies remembering the rhythm of building together. Lily blossomed under Xavier's attentive care. He taught her to ride a gentle pony he'd been training, showed her how to identify animal tracks in the forest, and spent hours patiently answering her endless questions about the world. Each night he told her stories until she fell asleep, then emerged from the alcove with a look of wonder on his face, as if he couldn't quite believe his good fortune. She's extraordinary, he told Eliza one evening as they sat on the porch, watching fireflies rise from the meadow grasses. Smart as a whip and fearless, just like her mother, Eliza smiled, warmed by his words. She's adapting so well, I worried she might struggle having known only me for so long. Children are resilient, Xavier observed, and they know where they're loved. He hesitated, then added, the schoolteacher position in town is opening up come fall. Mrs. Holloway is expecting her 4th child and doesn't plan to return. Could be a good fit for you if you're interested. The offer touched her. He was thinking of their future, planning for them to stay. I'd like that, she admitted. I've missed teaching. Xavier nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. They sat in companionable silence as twilight deepened around them. Finally, he spoke again, his voice carefully neutral. Abner Collins asked about you at the livery today. Eliza glanced at him, surprised. Abner, I barely remember him. He's the new owner of the general store, widower with 2 young sons. Xavier kept his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. Mentioned he'd seen you in town yesterday with Lily, wondered if you were spoken for. Understanding dawned. And what did you tell him? Xavier shrugged, a gesture belied by the tension in his shoulders, that he'd have to ask you himself. Eliza studied his profile in the fading light, the strong line of his jaw, the slight furrow between his brows. Jealousy looked foreign on him, uncomfortable. And if he does ask, she pressed gently. Xavier finally turned to her, vulnerability evident in his eyes. What would you tell him? Eliza held his gaze steadily. I would tell him that while I'm not exactly spoken for, my heart isn't free to give. The breath Xavier released was audible in the quiet evening. No, she confirmed softly. It never has been, not since I gave it to a certain stubborn cowboy years ago. Xavier shifted closer on the bench, his hand finding hers. This stubborn cowboy never gave yours back either, he murmured. Kept it safe, waiting. His fingers entwined with hers, and Eliza felt the careful walls they'd maintained begin to crumble. They weren't the same people who had fallen in love years ago. Life had shaped and changed them both, but the foundation remained, stronger perhaps for having weathered separation and pain. Xav, she began hesitantly, I don't expect things to be as they were before. Too much has happened. I don't want things as they were, he replied, surprising her. We were young, reckless with our happiness. I want something stronger now, something built on truth and choice. His thumb traced circles on her palm. I want to court you properly, Eliza Blackett. Not rush headlong into something because it feels good, but build something that will last through whatever comes. Tears pricked at Eliza's eyes. I'd like that, she whispered. In the soft glow of twilight, Xavier leaned forward, his free hand coming up to gently cup her cheek. His eyes asked a silent question, and Eliza answered by closing the distance between them. Their lips met in a kiss that began tentatively a reacquaintance after long absence, but quickly deepened into something more urgent, more honest. The years fell away and yet remained present in the skillful way Xavier drew her closer, in the confidence with which Eliza wound her arms around his neck. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Xavier rested his forehead against hers. I've dreamed of doing that every night for 3 years, he admitted roughly. Eliza's laugh was breathless. Your dreams didn't do you justice. His answering smile kindled a warmth in her chest that spread outward, banishing the last of the cold loneliness that had been her constant companion for too long. From inside the cabin came a small voice. Mama, Papa, where are you? They pulled apart, exchanging rueful smiles. Out here, sweet pea, Xavier called, just enjoying the evening air. Lily appeared in the doorway, hair tousled from sleep, clutching her kitten. I had a bad dream, she announced. Xavier immediately rose, crossing to scoop her up. Well now, that won't do at all. How about we all go inside and I'll make us some warm milk with honey while you tell us about it? Lily nodded solemnly, then peered over his shoulder at Eliza. Mama, your face is all red. Are you too hot? Eliza touched her flushed cheeks, meeting Xavier's amused gaze over their daughter's head. Something like that, she managed, following them inside. Later, with Lily resettled in bed, Xavier lingered by the door, clearly reluctant to return to his lean-to. Eliza felt the same pull, the same desire to prolong their time together. Tomorrow's Sunday, he said. Thought maybe we could all ride into town for church, then have dinner at Clara's restaurant after. Proper family outing. Family, the word sent a thrill through Eliza. That sounds lovely, Xavier nodded, shifting his weight. Guess I should turn in then. I suppose so, she agreed, though neither moved. Finally, with a rueful chuckle, Xavier stepped forward and pressed a swift, chaste kiss to her lips. Good night, Eliza, she caught his hand as he turned to go. Xav, she said quietly, thank you for welcoming us back. For forgiving what I'm not sure I could forgive, were our positions reversed. His expression softened. There's nothing that needs forgiving, he said simply. You did what you had to for our child. I only wish I could have protected you both so you never had to make that choice. In that moment, watching him silhouetted in the doorway, Eliza knew with absolute certainty that returning to Riversbend had been the right decision, perhaps the first truly right decision she'd made in years. Good night, she whispered, and this time let him go, knowing with certainty that he would return in the morning and all the mornings after. Sunday morning dawned clear and promising. Eliza dressed Lily in her best dress, freshly laundered and pressed, and arranged her blonde curls with painstaking care. The child could barely contain her excitement at the prospect of attending church and being introduced to the townspeople as Xavier Ingram's daughter. Will they like me, Mama? She asked as Eliza tied a ribbon in her hair. They'll adore you, Eliza assured her, just as your father does. Xavier had risen earlier than usual, determined to make everything perfect for their first public outing as a family. He'd polished the small wagon until it gleamed, groomed the horses to a shine, and even managed to find a wildflower bouquet for each of his ladies, as he called them. When Eliza emerged from the cabin with Lily, she found Xavier waiting beside the wagon, dressed in what was clearly his Sunday best clean dark trousers, a pressed white shirt, and a vest she recognized as one she'd helped him select years ago. His usually unruly hair was slicked back, and he'd trimmed his beard neatly. The transformation from rugged cowboy to respectable townsman was striking. His eyes widened appreciatively as they took in Eliza's appearance. She'd done her best with her limited wardrobe, wearing a simple blue dress that brought out the amber flecks in her brown eyes, her hair arranged in a neat chignon at the nape of her neck. "You look beautiful," he said simply, offering her the small bouquet of wildflowers. "As do you," she replied, accepting the flowers with a smile. "Very handsome." "And me?" Lily demanded, twirling to show off her dress. Xavier knelt before her, presenting her own tiny bouquet with a flourish. "You, Miss Lily, are the prettiest girl in all of Montana Territory." The child beamed, clutching her flowers. "Can I sit up front with you, Papa?" "Of course you can," he agreed, helping her climb onto the wagon seat before turning to offer Eliza his hand. The simple courtesy, his warm palm against hers, the strength with which he helped her up reminded Eliza of countless similar moments from their past. He'd always been unfailingly gentle with her, respectful in a way few men on the frontier bothered to be. The journey into town was filled with Lily's excited chatter. Xavier pointed out landmarks along the way: the creek where he'd taught Eliza to fish, the bend in the road where they'd once been caught in a sudden summer storm and had sheltered under a boulder, laughing as the rain pounded around them. Eliza watched him as he drove, noting how naturally he included Lily in these stories, weaving their daughter into the tapestry of their shared past as if she'd always been present. It eased an ache. She hadn't fully acknowledged the pain of those missed years when Lily had been separated from her father. As they approached town, Xavier reached over, briefly squeezing Eliza's hand where it rested on the seat between them. "Ready?" he asked quietly. She nodded, though her stomach fluttered with nerves. During her previous visits to town, she'd kept to herself, avoiding prolonged conversations. Today would be different. Today, they would present themselves as a family, inviting the town's scrutiny and judgment. The small white church at the edge of town was already surrounded by wagons and horses when they arrived. Xavier helped them down, then offered Eliza his arm with formal courtesy. With Lily between them, holding both their hands, they walked toward the church steps. Conversations faltered as they approached. Heads turned, expressions ranging from surprise to curiosity to warm welcome. Eliza felt the weight of every gaze, but Xavier's steady presence beside her gave her courage. "Xavier, Miss Blackett." Martha Wilson, the town's most prominent gossip, hurried forward. Her sharp eyes took in their linked arms, then dropped to Lily. "And who might this lovely young lady be?" Before Eliza could respond, Xavier spoke clearly, his voice carrying to all those gathered nearby. "Mrs. Wilson, I'd like you to meet my daughter, Lily." The pride in his voice was unmistakable. "Lily, this is Mrs. Wilson, who makes the best apple pies in the territory." A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Lily, oblivious to the sensation she was causing, executed a perfect curtsy. "Pleased to meet you, madam." Martha's mouth worked soundlessly for a moment before she recovered. "Well, aren't you just the prettiest thing, and such lovely manners?" She turned to Eliza, curiosity burning in her eyes. "We'd heard you were back in town, dear, but no one mentioned." "It's a long story," Eliza said with a smile that discouraged further questioning. "Perhaps another time." Xavier guided them past Martha and up the church steps, nodding and greeting various townspeople as they went. Inside, he led them to a pew near the middle of the church. Eliza felt the stairs continuing, heard the whispers, but Xavier's hand at the small of her back remained steady, grounding her. As the service began, Eliza found herself relaxing. The familiar hymns, the sunlight streaming through the simple stained glass, the peaceful atmosphere all combined to ease her anxiety. Beside her, Xavier sang in his rich baritone, occasionally helping Lily find her place in the hymnal they shared. After the service, they stood in the churchyard, accepting congratulations and fielding curious questions with practiced vagueness. Xavier never left Eliza's side, his presence a silent declaration to everyone present. They were together, a family, and he would brook no judgment or interference. Clara's restaurant was busy with the after-church crowd, but Xavier had reserved a table near the window. As they were seated, he leaned close to Eliza. "You're doing wonderfully," he murmured. "I know this isn't easy." She offered him a grateful smile. "It's easier with you beside me." "Where I intend to stay," he replied, his blue eyes serious. Over a meal of roast chicken and fresh vegetables, they talked easily about plans for the coming week. Xavier mentioned needing to repair the corral fence, and Eliza offered to help. Lily contributed her own suggestions, most involving the integration of her kitten into these activities. It was halfway through the meal when Sheriff Thomas Reeves approached their table. A tall man with iron-gray hair and a weathered face, he'd been sheriff in Riversbend for as long as Eliza could remember. "Xavier," he greeted with a nod. "Miss Blackett, good to see you back in town." His kind eyes moved to Lily. "And who's this young lady?" "My daughter, Lily," Xavier answered proudly. "Lily, this is Sheriff Reeves. He keeps everyone in town safe." Lily regarded the lawman solemnly. "Do you have a gun?" she asked. The sheriff chuckled. "I do indeed, young miss, though I don't often need to use it." "My papa has a gun too," Lily informed him. "He keeps it high up so I can't reach it, but he said when I'm bigger, he'll teach me to shoot so I can protect myself." Reeves's eyebrows rose slightly, and he glanced between Xavier and Eliza. "Smart man, your papa," he said to Lily, then addressed Xavier. "When you have a moment, I'd like to speak with you about the position we discussed. No rush, though. Enjoy your family dinner." After the sheriff departed, Eliza looked questioningly at Xavier. "Position." He focused on cutting his chicken. "Sheriff's getting on in years. Mentioned he's looking for a deputy with an eye toward retirement in a year or two." Eliza's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "You, a deputy?" Xavier shrugged, though she could see this was important to him. "Been thinking about it for a while now. The livery work is steady, but a deputy's position comes with a proper salary, a future, room for advancement." He met her eyes. "Stability for a family." The implication wasn't lost on Eliza. He was planning for them, for a future together. "It could be dangerous," she said quietly. "Riversbend isn't exactly a hotbed of criminal activity," Xavier pointed out. "Most exciting thing that happens here is the occasional drunk cowhand on payday." "I think you'd make a very good deputy," Lily chimed in, clearly following the adult conversation with interest. "You're brave and kind, just like I told you." Xavier's face softened as he looked at his daughter. "Thank you, sweet pea, that means a lot." Eliza watched them, her heart full. Whatever misgivings she might have about Xavier taking on a more dangerous profession, she couldn't deny that his motivation was pure. He wanted to provide for them, to build a secure future. "I think," she said carefully, "that Lily is right. You would make an excellent deputy." The smile Xavier gave her was worth any worry she might harbor. It was filled with gratitude, love, and a quiet joy that made her breath catch. As they finished their meal and prepared to return home, Xavier helping Lily into her light jacket while Eliza gathered their things, Eliza was struck by the perfect domesticity of it all. This was what she'd denied them for 3 years, these simple, everyday moments of family life. The realization both saddened and strengthened her resolve. She couldn't change the past, but she could embrace this second chance with her whole heart. Outside, as Xavier helped them into the wagon, Clara Peterson hurried from the restaurant. "Xavier, I nearly forgot." She handed him a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Your special order from Denver came in yesterday." Xavier thanked her, tucking the package into his jacket pocket with a secretive smile that piqued Eliza's curiosity. When she raised a questioning eyebrow, he merely winked, offering no explanation. The ride home was peaceful, Lily eventually nodding off against Xavier's shoulder, lulled by the wagon's gentle rocking. As the cabin came into view, bathed in the golden light of late afternoon, Eliza was struck by how much it already felt like home again, more so than any place she'd lived in the past 3 years. Xavier carried their sleeping daughter inside and tucked her into bed for a nap. When he emerged from the alcove, he found Eliza on the porch, gazing out at the mountains. "Thank you for today," she said as he joined her, "for making it easier than it might have been." He leaned against the railing beside her. "Nothing to thank me for. I was proud to have you both with me." Eliza studied his profile, remembering the mysterious package. "What was in the parcel Clara gave you?" Xavier's lips curved in a small smile. "Curious, are you?" "Perhaps a little," she admitted. He reached into his pocket and withdrew the package, still wrapped in brown paper. "It's actually for you," he said, suddenly seeming almost shy. "I ordered it months ago after I heard about Mercer's death. Found myself hoping you might return someday." Puzzled, Eliza accepted the small package. It was light, whatever it contained hardly weighing anything at all. Carefully, she unwrapped the paper to reveal a small wooden box, simply but beautifully carved with a pattern of intertwined wildflowers. "Open it," Xavier encouraged softly. Eliza lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of soft cloth, lay a delicate silver ring set with a single small pearl. Simple, elegant, unmistakably an engagement ring. Her breath caught. "Xavier." "I'm not asking, not yet," he hastened to explain. "It's too soon, I know that, but I wanted you to have it, to know that whenever you're ready, if you ever are, it's waiting." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "I ordered it as an act of faith, I suppose, faith that someday I might have the chance to give it to you properly." Tears welled in Eliza's eyes as she gently touched the pearl. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Like you," he said simply. He reached out, closing her fingers around the box. "Keep it. No obligations, no pressure, just a promise that my heart is yours whenever you choose to claim it fully." Eliza looked up at him, this man who had welcomed her back without reservation, who had embraced their daughter with a love so pure it had brought him to tears, who now offered her his heart with patience and understanding she scarcely deserved. "I don't need more time," she said, the words tumbling out before she could reconsider. "I've wasted too much of it already." Xavier's eyes widened. "Eliza, you don't have to, I know," she interrupted. "That's why I can, because you're not demanding or expecting anything." She took a deep breath. "The answer is yes, Xavier. Whenever you decide to ask, my answer is yes." For a moment he seemed stunned, then a slow smile spread across his face, transforming it with joy. He took the box from her hands, carefully removed the ring, and with deliberate movements, lowered himself to one knee before her. "Eliza Blackett," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I've loved you since the moment you walked into Riversbend 4 years ago, looking lost and determined all at once. I've loved you through separation and heartache, through believing I'd lost you forever. I love the mother you've become to our daughter, and I want nothing more than to spend the rest of my life building a family with you both." He held up the ring. "Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," Eliza whispered, tears flowing freely now. "Yes, with all my heart." Xavier slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to his feet, gathering her into his arms. His kiss was tender at first, then increasingly passionate as Eliza responded, her arms winding around his neck, her body pressing closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Xavier rested his forehead against hers. "I never stopped believing we'd find our way back to each other," he confessed. "Even in my darkest moments, something in me knew." Eliza touched his face, tracing the lines that hadn't been there 3 years ago. "I'm sorry it took me so long to come home." "You're here now," he said simply. "That's all that matters," a small voice called from inside. "Mama, Papa." They turned to find Lily in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Why are you crying, Mama?" she asked, concern evident in her small face. Eliza laughed, wiping at her tears. "These are happy tears, sweet pea, very happy tears." Xavier lifted Lily into his arms. "Your mama has agreed to marry me," he explained. "That means we're going to be a proper family, all living together always." Lily's eyes widened. "Really, forever and ever," Xavier confirmed solemnly. The child looked between them, then broke into a wide smile. "I knew it," she declared with the confidence of youth. "I told Whiskers that's my kitten. I told him that my papa loved my mama and we were going to stay here forever." Xavier laughed, the sound rich and joyful. "Smart girl," he said, pressing a kiss to her forehead, "just like your mother." As the three of them stood together on the porch, the setting sun casting long shadows across the yard, Eliza felt a sense of rightness settle deep in her bones. The road that had led her back to Riversbend had been long and difficult, fraught with fear and loneliness, but standing here now, surrounded by love, she knew it had all been leading to this moment. This was where she belonged. This was home. The following weeks passed in a whirl of activity, as they prepared for a wedding that the entire town of Riversbend seemed determined to make a celebration for the ages. Martha Wilson appointed herself unofficial wedding coordinator, recruiting a committee of town matrons who descended on Xavier's cabin regularly with fabric samples, menu suggestions, and increasingly elaborate decorating schemes. Xavier took it all in stride, his amusement evident as he watched Eliza politely fend off the more outlandish ideas. "Let them have their fun," he advised when they were alone. "It's been a while since Riversbend had something happy to celebrate." Eliza could hardly argue. The townspeople had embraced them with an enthusiasm that surprised and touched her. The story of their separation and reunion, a carefully edited version that omitted Mercer's threats and emphasized Eliza's fears for Xavier's safety during a time of uncertainty, had captured the town's collective imagination. "It's like something from a dime novel," Clara had declared. The separated lovers, the secret child, the joyful reunion, romantic as can be. Xavier's appointment as deputy sheriff became official a week after their engagement. He still maintained his duties at the livery, but now split his time between both responsibilities. The dual income allowed them to begin expanding the cabin in earnest, adding a proper bedroom for Lily and improving the kitchen where Eliza spent much of her time. Lily flourished in their new life, forming friendships with other children in town and becoming a favorite of the townspeople with her bright intelligence and charming manners. She followed Xavier everywhere when he was home, absorbing his lessons about horses, weather patterns, and wilderness survival with an eagerness that made him beam with pride. "She's got your brains and my curiosity," he told Eliza one evening as they watched Lily carefully writing her letters at the table. "Heaven help us when she's grown." The security of their life together allowed Eliza to gradually shed the vigilant wariness that had become second nature during her years alone. She found herself laughing more easily, sleeping more deeply, loving more freely. The fear that had driven her away from Riversbend seemed increasingly like a distant nightmare, fading in the warm light of their present happiness. 2 weeks before the wedding, Xavier returned from town with unexpected news. "The school board officially offered you the teaching position," he announced as he entered the cabin. Starting after harvest time, Eliza looked up from the dress she was altering for Lily. "Already, but the interview isn't until next week." Xavier grinned, removing his hat and hanging it by the door. "Apparently they didn't see the need to wait. Mrs. Collins Abner's sister is on the board. Said your credentials from Wyoming were more than sufficient, and my recommendation carried weight given my new position in town." He crossed to kiss her lightly. "Congratulations, soon to be Mrs. Ingram." The name sent a thrill through Eliza. "Mrs. Ingram," she repeated, testing the sound of it. "I like that." "So do I," Xavier agreed, his eyes darkening with an emotion that made Eliza's cheeks warm. Their physical relationship had remained chaste since her return, Xavier insisting on propriety until they were properly wed, despite the obvious desire between them. The restraint was becoming increasingly difficult for both of them. Lily burst in from outside where she'd been feeding her kitten, now a half-grown cat. "Papa, Mrs. Wilson brought a whole basket of cookies to the Pearsons, and Sarah said I could have one if you said it was all right," Xavier chuckled. "1 cookie then," he agreed. "And be sure to thank Mrs. Wilson properly." As Lily dashed back out, Xavier turned to Eliza with a mischievous smile. "What do you say we arrange for Lily to spend the night at the Pearsons after the wedding? Sarah's mother already offered." Eliza felt herself blushing again. That seems like a sensible arrangement, she managed, trying to sound practical rather than eager. Xavier's low laugh suggested she hadn't succeeded. He stepped closer, his hands settling on her waist. 2 weeks, he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. 2 more weeks, and then I won't have to say goodnight and walk out to that lean-to anymore. Eliza leaned into him, savoring his warmth. The lean-to has served its purpose, she said, but I won't pretend I'm not looking forward to having you in our bed instead. Xavier groaned softly, resting his forehead against hers. You're testing my resolve, woman, she smiled against his cheek, just making sure it's strong as iron, he assured her, though his hands tightened on her waist, though you're doing your best to melt it down. The sound of Lily's returning footsteps had them stepping apart, exchanging looks of mingled amusement and frustration. Soon, Eliza reminded herself. Soon, they would begin their life together properly, with nothing held back. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and cool, a perfect late summer day in the mountains. Eliza stood in Clara's spare bedroom, where she'd spent the night in accordance with tradition, allowing herself a rare moment of quiet reflection before the day's festivities began. The woman in the mirror was both familiar and strange to her, familiar in her features, but strange in the happiness that radiated from her eyes, the peaceful confidence in her posture. 3 years ago, she'd fled this town in terror, certain she was protecting those she loved by leaving. Now she was binding herself to this place, to these people, with bonds she never intended to break. A soft knock at the door preceded Clara's entrance. The older woman carried a small package wrapped in tissue paper. "Special delivery from your groom," she announced with a smile. "He's been up since dawn, apparently, nervous as a cat in a roomful of rocking chairs." Eliza accepted the package with a smile. Inside, she found a delicate silver locket on a fine chain and a folded note in Xavier's bold handwriting. "For my bride," it read. "To hold memories of our past and future together close to your heart. All my love, X." Inside the locket was a tiny daguerreotype that she recognized immediately, a small copy of the photograph taken of them at the town's Founders' Day celebration 4 years ago, shortly after they'd met. They were standing side by side, not quite touching but clearly aware of each other, both young and untroubled by the trials that lay ahead. "Oh," Eliza breathed, touching the image gently. "That man is besotted with you," Clara observed, helping Eliza fasten the locket around her neck. "Has been since the day you arrived in Riversbend, truth be told. And I with him," Eliza admitted softly. "Even when I convinced myself I was doing the right thing by staying away." Clara patted her shoulder. "The right thing brought you back to him in the end, that's what matters." She glanced at the clock on the bedside table. "Now, let's get you into that dress. Can't keep that handsome deputy waiting at the altar too long." The simple white dress had been a gift from the women of Riversbend, each contributing to its creation. Martha Wilson had provided the fabric, Clara had done the cutting, and various other women had taken turns with the stitching and embellishments. The result was a gown more beautiful than anything Eliza could have afforded on her own, elegant in its simplicity, with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. As Clara helped her into it, Eliza felt a wave of gratitude for this community that had welcomed her back with such generosity, that had embraced Lily as one of their own, that had forgiven her unexplained absence without demanding more explanation than she was comfortable giving. "There," Clara declared, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "You're a vision, Eliza. Xavier won't know what hit him." A commotion from the main room of Clara's house announced the arrival of Lily, who had spent the night with the Pearsons. The child burst into the bedroom, already dressed in her role as flower girl, her blonde curls arranged with fresh wildflowers. "Mama," she exclaimed, stopping short at the sight of Eliza in her wedding dress. "You look like an angel." Eliza knelt, careful of her dress, and embraced her daughter. "And you look like a fairy princess," she said, adjusting one of the flowers in Lily's hair. "Are you ready for your important job today?" Lily nodded solemnly. "I practiced with Mrs. Pearson. I'm supposed to walk slowly and drop the flower petals one by one, not all at once." "That's right," Eliza confirmed. "And after the ceremony, what happens?" I get to stay with Sarah overnight while you and Papa have special time alone, Lily recited. And tomorrow we'll all be together in our house as a real family. Eliza's heart swelled with love for this child who had adapted so readily to each change in their circumstances. That's exactly right. Another knock at the door heralded Sheriff Reeves, who had offered to escort Eliza to the church in the absence of any family. He paused in the doorway, hat in hand, his weathered face softening at the sight of Eliza in her wedding finery. "Miss Blackett," he said formally, "you are a picture of loveliness today." Eliza rose to her feet, smoothing her dress. "Thank you, Sheriff, and thank you for agreeing to give me away." The older man nodded, a twinkle in his eye. "It's my honor, though I suspect Xavier would hunt me down if I actually gave you away anywhere but directly to him." With final adjustments to her veil and flowers, Eliza allowed herself to be led to the waiting buggy, Lily skipping alongside, Clara following with the small wedding party that had assembled to accompany the bride. The church was filled to capacity when they arrived, the entire town having turned out for the occasion. As Eliza stood at the back, Sheriff Reeves beside her, she felt a moment of nervous anticipation. Then the small group of musicians, the blacksmith on fiddle, the barber on accordion, and young Tommy Peterson on harmonica began to play, and Lily started her careful procession down the aisle, dropping rose petals with exaggerated care. Finally, it was Eliza's turn. As she stepped into the church on Sheriff Reeves's arm, her eyes found Xavier immediately. He stood tall and proud at the altar, dressed in a new suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his blue eyes fixed on her with an intensity that took her breath away. The walk down the aisle seemed both endless and too brief. When they reached the altar, Sheriff Reeves placed Eliza's hand in Xavier's with a quiet, "Take care of her, son." "With my life," Xavier promised, his voice steady and sure. As they turned to face Pastor Mitchell, Xavier leaned close to whisper, "You're a vision, Eliza Blackett." The ceremony itself passed in a blur of emotion for Eliza. She was aware of the pastor's words, of Xavier's hand warm and steady in hers, of Lily watching with solemn attention from her place beside them. But mostly she was aware of Xavier's eyes, never leaving hers, filled with a love so profound it humbled her. When it came time for the vows, Xavier spoke with quiet confidence, his voice carrying clearly through the church. "Eliza, I take you as my wife, promising to cherish and protect you all the days of my life. Through good times and hardship, through joy and sorrow, my heart is yours completely. I vow to be a faithful husband to you and a loving father to our daughter, to build a home filled with laughter and love, and to thank God every day for bringing you back to me." Tears welled in Eliza's eyes as she spoke her own vows. "Xavier, I take you as my husband, promising to love and honor you all the days of my life. I vow to stand beside you through whatever challenges we may face, to create a home where trust and honesty prevail, to be a faithful wife to you and a devoted mother to our daughter. My heart, which has always been yours, I now entrust to you completely and forever." The exchange of rings, a simple gold band to accompany Eliza's pearl engagement ring, and a matching band for Xavier sealed their promises. When Pastor Mitchell finally pronounced them husband and wife, Xavier's kiss was both tender and possessive, a promise of the night to come and the lifetime that would follow. The celebration afterward seemed to encompass the entire town. Tables had been set up in the town square, laden with food contributed by every household. Music and dancing continued well into the evening, with Xavier and Eliza sharing their first dance to the fiddle's sweet rendition of a waltz he'd taught her years ago. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the square, Xavier found Eliza where she stood watching Lily dance with several other children. "Mrs. Ingram," he said softly, coming up behind her and slipping his arms around her waist, "I believe it's time I took you home." The warmth in his voice sent a shiver of anticipation through Eliza. "Is it proper for the bride and groom to leave their own celebration so early?" she teased. Xavier pressed a kiss to the curve of her neck. "I don't particularly care about proper right now," he admitted. I've waited 3 years to have you as my wife. I'm not inclined to wait much longer. Eliza turned in his arms, aware of the desire evident in his eyes, a desire she knew was mirrored in her own. Then take me home, Mr. Ingram. They said their goodbyes, accepting congratulations and good-natured teasing with grace. Lily, already happily ensconced with the Pearson family for the night, gave them each a fierce hug before returning to her playmates without a backward glance. The ride to their cabin was charged with anticipation, Xavier's hand finding Eliza's on the seat between them, their fingers intertwining with familiar ease. When they arrived, he surprised her by lifting her into his arms to carry her across the threshold, a tradition she hadn't expected from her practical cowboy. "Welcome home, Mrs. Ingram," he murmured as he set her down in the main room of the cabin, now transformed by the improvements they'd made together. Fresh curtains hung at the windows, a new rug brightened the plank floor, and wildflowers spilled from a vase on the table, small touches that had turned the bachelor's quarters into a family home. "It feels right," Eliza said softly, looking around, "being here with you like this." Xavier's expression grew serious as he took her hands in his. "I want you to know something," he said. "I understand why you left. I don't hold it against you, and I never will. What matters is that you came back, that you brought our daughter home to me." Tears pricked at Eliza's eyes. "I never stopped loving you," she whispered. "Even when I convinced myself I was protecting you by staying away, I know." His thumbs traced gentle circles on her palms, "And I never stopped loving you, not for a single day." He released her hands to cup her face, his touch reverent as his lips found hers in a kiss that started gently but quickly deepened into something more urgent. Eliza wound her arms around his neck, pressing closer, feeling the restraint that had characterized their interactions dissolving in the heat building between them. Xavier broke the kiss to trail his lips along her jaw, down the column of her throat. "I've dreamed of this," he murmured against her skin, "of having you in my arms again, of calling you my wife." Eliza's fingers tangled in his hair, holding him close. "Show me," she whispered. "Show me how much you've missed me." His eyes, when he lifted his head to meet her gaze, were dark with desire. Without a word, he swept her into his arms again, carrying her to the bedroom that was now truly theirs. There, in the soft glow of lamplight, he showed her with exquisite care exactly how deeply he had missed her, how completely he loved her, how thoroughly he intended to cherish her for the rest of their days. Afterward, lying in the circle of his arms, Eliza's head resting on his chest where she could hear the strong, steady beat of his heart, she felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for years. This was where she belonged, not just in Riversbend or in this cabin, but with this man who had waited for her, forgiven her, welcomed her home with an open heart. "What are you thinking?" Xavier asked softly, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her bare shoulder. Eliza smiled against his skin. "That I'm the luckiest woman in Montana territory." His chuckle rumbled through his chest. "Funny, I was just thinking I'm the luckiest man." She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him, drinking in the sight of his face, relaxed in contentment, his usually neat hair tousled from her fingers. "I love you, Xavier Ingram," she said simply, "more than I have words to express." His eyes softened. "You don't need words," he assured her, drawing her down for a tender kiss. "I can see it in your eyes, feel it in your touch." His hand came up to cradle her face. "And I love you just as much, Eliza Ingram. You and Lily are my whole world." As moonlight spilled through the curtains and the night deepened around them, Eliza surrendered herself again to his embrace, to the love that had survived separation and misunderstanding, that had drawn her back across miles of wilderness to this man, this home, this life that was now irrevocably and joyfully hers. The years that followed their wedding unfolded with a happiness that sometimes still took Eliza's breath away. Life on the frontier was never easy. There were hard winters, dry summers, illnesses and setbacks, but facing them together with Xavier made even the difficult times bearable. Lily thrived in Riversbend, excelling in school, though Eliza was careful never to show favoritism when she became her daughter's teacher. forming deep friendships and developing a remarkable talent with horses that Xavier encouraged with obvious pride. As she grew, the resemblance to both her parents became more pronounced. She had Eliza's determination and compassion, Xavier's adventurous spirit and quick smile. Xavier's position as deputy sheriff eventually led to his appointment as sheriff when Thomas Reeves retired 2 years after their wedding. The role suited him his natural authority and fair-mindedness, earning him the respect of even the rowdiest elements in town. Under his watchful eye, Riversbend prospered and grew, attracting new settlers drawn by its reputation for stability and safety. Eliza continued teaching, finding fulfillment in shaping young minds and watching the town's children grow into capable young adults. Her classroom became known throughout the territory for its progressive methods and excellent results, with several of her students going on to colleges in the East. Their family expanded 14 months after their wedding with the birth of their son, James Thomas Ingram, named for both their fathers. He was joined 2 years later by a sister, Grace Clara, whose arrival nearly cost Eliza her life when complications arose during the difficult birth. Xavier had never left her side during those terrifying hours, his face gray with fear as he held her hand and prayed with a fervor that surprised even him. When she finally emerged from the darkness of unconsciousness, weak but alive, he had wept openly, pressing kisses to her hands, her face, her hair. "Don't you ever scare me like that again," he'd commanded, his voice rough with emotion. "I can't lose you, Eliza, I won't survive it." She had recovered slowly, surrounded by the love of her family and the support of the town. Martha Wilson organized a rotation of women to help with the children and household. Clara provided nourishing meals, and Xavier somehow managed to balance his duties as sheriff with caring for his family with a tenderness that endeared him even more to everyone in Riversbend. On their 5th wedding anniversary, with Lily now 10 and becoming increasingly independent, James a sturdy toddler, and baby Grace beginning to take her first tentative steps, Xavier surprised Eliza with a gift that brought tears to her eyes. The deed to a larger property on the outskirts of town, with a spacious house he'd been secretly having built for months. "Room for our family to grow," he explained as he showed her through the airy rooms, his arm around her waist. "A proper study for you to prepare your lessons, space for the children to play, and land for those horses Lily keeps begging for." Eliza had turned to him, overwhelmed by this tangible evidence of his love and planning. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Everything I could have wished for." His smile, still boyish despite the increasing silver in his hair, warmed her heart. "Not quite everything," he corrected, guiding her to the master bedroom where a beautiful cradle stood beside their bed, a cradle large enough for two. Eliza's eyes widened. "Xavier Ingram, are you hoping for twins?" he laughed, pulling her into his arms. "I'm hoping for whatever God sees fit to bless us with," he said. "But mostly, I'm hoping for more years just like these past 5 filled with your love, our children's laughter, and the life we've built together." And as he lowered his mouth to hers in a kiss that still held all the passion of their first embraces, Eliza knew with absolute certainty that she had indeed found her way home, not just to Riversbend or to the beautiful house that would shelter their growing family, but to this man whose steadfast heart had waited for her, forgiven her, and loved her more completely than she had ever dreamed possible. On Lily's 16th birthday, the Ingram family gathered on the wide porch of their home for a celebration that included half the town. Xavier stood with his arm around Eliza's waist, watching with pride as their eldest child, no longer a child at all, but a young woman with her mother's grace and her father's confidence, accepted congratulations and gifts from the assembled guests. "Hard to believe she was just a little thing when you brought her back to me," Xavier murmured, pressing a kiss to Eliza's temple. "Look at her now." Eliza leaned into his embrace, contentment washing over her. "She's remarkable," she agreed. "They all are." Their family had indeed grown, just as Xavier had hoped. Twin boys, Matthew and Mark, had arrived 2 years after they moved into the new house, followed 3 years later by their youngest daughter, Faith. With Lily, James, and Grace, They now had 6 children ranging from 16 years to 5, a boisterous, loving brood that filled their home with noise, laughter, and occasional chaos. Xavier, now in his 11th year as sheriff, had become one of the most respected men in the territory. His fairness, courage, and unwavering integrity had made Riversbend a model of frontier law and order. He wore the responsibility with the same quiet dignity he brought to his role as husband and father. Eliza had eventually given up her teaching position to focus on their growing family, though she still tutored occasionally and served on the school board. She had found other ways to contribute to the community as well, establishing Riversbend's first lending library and organizing a women's aid society that provided support to new settlers and families in need. The years had changed them both, of course. Silver now threaded liberally through Xavier's dark hair, and fine lines marked the corners of his eyes, smile lines. He insisted whenever Eliza teased him about them. Her own figure had softened with the bearing of 5 children, and she had long since stopped trying to maintain the slender shape of her youth. Yet Xavier still looked at her with the same heat and tenderness he had when they were young, still sought her out in a crowded room as if she were the only person there, still held her at night with a possessiveness that made her feel treasured beyond measure. "Penny for your thoughts," he said now, noticing her contemplative expression. Eliza smiled up at him. "I was just thinking how fortunate I am," she replied, "how different our lives might have been if I hadn't found the courage to come back to Riversbend all those years ago." Xavier's arm tightened around her waist. "You would have come back eventually," he said with certainty, "and I would have waited, however long it took." The absolute conviction in his voice warmed Eliza's heart. Even after 11 years of marriage, Xavier's faith in their connection, in the inevitability of their love, never failed to move her. "Mama, Papa." Their youngest daughter, Faith, came running up to them, her dark braids flying. "Matthew and Mark are trying to put frogs in the punch bowl." Xavier laughed, releasing Eliza to scoop Faith into his arms. "Are they now? Well, we can't have that. Let's go rescue the punch and the frogs." As he strode off to deal with their mischievous sons, Eliza watched him go with a heart full of love. The years had been kind to them, but it wasn't luck or fate that had blessed their marriage, it was choice. The daily choice to love, to forgive, to build together rather than apart. Lily approached, linking her arm through Eliza's. At 16, she was nearly as tall as her mother, with Xavier's blue eyes and Eliza's honey blonde hair. "Everything all right, Mama?" Eliza smiled at her firstborn, the child who had unknowingly brought her parents back together. "Everything is perfect, sweetheart." And as she looked around at the family and community they had built together, Eliza knew it was true. Not perfect in the sense of being without challenges or hardships. Life on the frontier would never be that, but perfect in all the ways that truly mattered. Rich in love, steeped in trust, grounded in the kind of partnership that could weather any storm. She had returned to Riversbend weary from years alone, uncertain of her welcome. She had watched her child run into the arms of the father she'd been denied, had seen this strong man weep at the discovery of the daughter he thought lost. And from that moment of raw vulnerability and truth, they had built a life more beautiful than anything Eliza could have imagined during those lonely years away. As the celebration continued around her, Xavier returned to her side, the twins suitably chastened, Faith now happily playing with the other young children. He slipped his arm around Eliza's waist again, drawing her close. "Have I told you today that I love you, Mrs. Ingram?" He murmured, his lips close to her ear. Eliza smiled, turning her face up to his. "You might have mentioned it this morning," she teased, "but I wouldn't object to hearing it again." Xavier's blue eyes, still as vivid and captivating as they had been when they first met, crinkled at the corners. "I love you, Eliza," he said simply. "More today than yesterday, less than tomorrow." As he lowered his head to kiss her, heedless of the gathering around them, Eliza reflected that some journeys, no matter how difficult, led exactly where they were meant to. Her long road back to Riversbend had been just such a journey, winding, painful at times, but ultimately leading home to the arms of the man who had always been her destination, her safe harbor, her heart's true north. And there, surrounded by the family they had created together, secure in a love that had overcome separation and misunderstanding to grow stronger with each passing year, Eliza Ingram knew with absolute certainty that she had found not just a place to belong, but the very essence of home itself.